we've got a pretty incredible story, and it's kind of record breaking for the United States of the event that happened back in February in terms of number of cold stun turtles that came ashore. And so that's kind of going to be the story I'm going to talk to you about, is sort of this 10 days of going out and rescuing, rehabilitating, and then ultimately being able to release many of these turtles back into the Gulf of Mexico, where they came from. And let's see. There we go. So like Sarah said, we're at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute. And so we're down at Port Aransas, Texas. We're located right at the ship channel, Port Aransas Ship Channel, which is the major thoroughfare that goes into Corpus Christi. So there's a big port there. So there's a lot of industrial traffic, but it's a great access from the Gulf of Mexico into the bays. And of course, a lot of the green sea turtles that I'm going to be talking about, they go up into those shallow bays whenever they're young, because they feed on the seagrasses and the algae and things like that that are in the shallow bays. And so I'll kind of tell you about the process there and why so many sea turtles ended up getting stranded during this cold stunning event. So I put up this map here because I thought it was really good to show that, you know, it wasn't just cold here, it was cold all over the US. This was a major storm that had come through. And anyone that's familiar with South Texas, especially the Corpus Christi area, you know, it doesn't snow here. That's rare. You know, I can name about 3 times in my entire life where it snowed here. And, you know, for it to get below freezing for a full day is like unheard of. And when that happens, there's a lot of impacts, not only to the sea turtles I'll be talking to you about, but to vegetation, to fish, other animals and things like that. So we knew that this was going to be a pretty bad event. We've got a number of different groups that work to kind of monitor and predict what the temperatures are going to be like for the air and the water. And when you're looking at sea turtles and when they can get cold stun, and the cold stunning happens when water temperatures get below a certain threshold. And typically we just say 50 degrees. You'll notice the red line here is a little below that, and I'll kind of talk about that. But that 50 degrees is when you'll start finding sea turtles washing up. And normally they're alive, you know, when water temperatures get to the 50 degrees. It's just that their metabolism slows down and they're floating there. And so whenever that happens, they could either drown, you know, if the water temperatures don't warm up soon enough, or they wash ashore and predators get them. And so, you know, we find them with vultures on them, coyotes. We've got a lot of coyotes here, but even small things like fire ants. So fire ants will get on them. And so we want to be able to pick them up before any of that happens. Another thing that happens to these sea turtles is that boats can hit them. So they come in with their shells broken open from what we call boat strikes. And those turtles that come in like that, usually we don't end up releasing them when the water temperature warms up. You know, they need more treatment. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But the Conrad Bleacher Institute at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they have monitoring gauges down along the coast and up in the bays. And so they're able to predict, based on what the forecast is, what the temperatures will be like for the water. So that's what we watch out for, because whenever those water temperatures go below the threshold, which is about 57 degrees, is when you'll start getting the mass, I'd say a moderate number of sea turtles coming in, you know, and you can notice the lines here of the air temperature and the water, the predicted water temperatures. And whenever you start getting down into the low 40s and upper 30s, which is what we got, you get a mass stranding. So we knew that this was going to happen a few days before. And so there's a number of different groups that I'll show you here in a second. They kind of start staging and getting ready for going out and picking up these turtles before they're out in the environment too long so that we can get them into a warm place until the water temperatures warm up. But this is important right here, and that work that's being done. And so this is kind of tells you some of the stuff I've talked to you about when we have a mass stranding event. And I put an image here whenever we would go out. This is on the first day. We had roads that were iced over. Nobody could get to the North Padre Island and Mustang Island because the bridges were iced over. And so really it was an effort of the people that had made plans ahead of time to stay in a hotel on the island so that they didn't have to go over those overpasses that were closed down. So this is an image from doing some of the rescues. You'd go up to some of these beaches and they'd have turtles all along them. So this particular beach that I was at here with staff from the Amos Rehabilitation Keep, we found about 18 turtles and it was a stretch of beach that was probably 100 yards long. And so that just kind of gives you an idea of how many turtles you would be finding in the area. And this is a list. The main thing is not that you can actually read all these, but just that there's a lot of groups a lot of groups that are involved in this, and to show you the interest of wanting to protect these animals. What's not on here is all the volunteers. And so there's some groups here and volunteers that were involved with some of these groups, but there's a lot of individuals. So people in their own boats that are going out looking for sea turtles, putting them on their boat and then bringing them to the folks that log them in and then eventually rehabilitate them and get them back out. And so I always want to say a thanks to the folks that are really doing the groundwork here. And you'll notice there's a lot, the National Park Service. So Dr. Donna Shaver, if y'all are interested in sea turtles, she's the lady in Texas who's been here for decades protecting, especially the Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, but she's the Texas coordinator for sea turtles. And so if you ever hear anything about sea turtles in Texas, Dr. Donna Shaver is the one that's been leading the effort to conserve these animals. So I'll kind of go through the step here of rescue, rehab, and then eventually the fun part of release. And so you'll notice in this image here that this is a sea turtle. Whenever you walk up on these sea turtles, you can't tell whether they're dead or alive. So we pick them all up. And, if they're moving or something, they're alive. But a lot of them are like this one. So we'd go up to this one, pick it up. It wouldn't move at all. But what we end up doing is we take it into the warm room and we keep it there for 24 hours. And then, they might be alive, they might not, but that 24 hours is critical. But look along the shoreline here, you can see some other fish. So the cold temperatures, like the sea turtles have that temperature line that once they hit that threshold, the sea turtles, basically are just floating around out there. The same thing happens to fish. Fish, each species has their own limit and threshold that they can handle for this cold water. And a lot of these could not handle the temperatures that we got to. In some of the shallow bays, the temperatures were in the mid 30s, and a lot of these fish couldn't handle that. So the funny looking fish you see here, these are striped burrfish, and a lot of people call them puffer fish because when you catch them on a reel or something like that, they puff up. And so we saw a lot of those. Hardhead catfish was another one. We did see some redfish and sea trout. Those are the recreationally important species that people come down here from all over the world to fish for them. And so that's real. It's real bad to be able to see that because there's an effect for future generations. Some of these large fish that are increasing the population of these species, if those die, it could take years and years to be able to recover from that. And so, recreational fishing and commercial fishing could see the impacts for this years to come. So what we would do, we'd pick up all these sea turtles, and then if we had trucks, we'd just load them in the back of the trucks. Or if you're on a boat, load them in the boats and then bring them to one of the facilities. And so there's a number of different facilities in the coastal bend area where we're at that rehab sea turtles. So typically the National Park Service, so Dr. Donna Shaver, they would take the turtles in, they would log them in, how many they got and where they got them. Then they would distribute them to the Amos Rehabilitation Keep, the Texas State Aquarium, or the Texas Sea Life Center. So those are kind of the three areas here. Now, lower in Texas, there's the Sea Turtle Inc., and that's down in South Padre. And then up north, Chris Marshall runs a facility up there in Galveston area. So those are kind of all 5 facilities that have permits. Remember, these are a lot of them are endangered species, and you have to have special permits to handle them, or anything like that. So we've got a lot of permits to be able to do this type of work. Now, the other unfortunate thing, and Sarah mentioned this, was that we had a power outage. So there was so much demand, and a lot of people all across Texas lost their power. And so this wasn't just at the Amos Rehabilitation Keep there at the university. This was the entire city of Port Aransas lost its power. Nobody had power. And so we had a couple of generators that we could run space heaters on just to keep these spaces warm. And luckily, that lasted about 24 hours, and then the power came back on. Unfortunately, what happened is that we had our freshwater pipes that broke, and then we had no water. So luckily, when the power came back on, we still had salt water because we pulled water in from the ship channel to fill up the pools where then we put the sea turtles. And so luckily we had salt water, but we had no fresh water the entire time for about 10 days, no fresh water. Okay, so the process is once we pick them up, we put them in the trucks, boats, whatever, then we get them into the facility. We put them what we call dry dock. And so for 24 hours before you ever put them in the water, you put them out on land because you can't tell whether they're dead or alive many times. And so you'd be surprised. We thought a lot of these were dead. And then we'd come back, early in the morning to check on them, and they're moving around because their body temperatures were able to warm up. And so that's always a really good sign. And then we have a couple of veterinarians that we work with, Dr. Paula Baker. She's been working with us for probably about 4 years now. And then Dr. Shana Whitaker is a veterinarian that's been working with us for about 6 months now. And they are critical to this entire operation. If we did not have veterinarians, we could not do this work. And it's the same with all these facilities that I talked about that have permits. Veterinarians are the key to making this work. And so every single turtle was inspected that came in. And when I tell you how many that came in, you'll probably blow your mind of how much work it is. And so, we were working 13 to 14-hour days for a good 8 to 10 days to be able to save these animals. Now, the other thing that we do is while they're dry docked, we put Vaseline on their shells. And then there's also eye drops to put in their eye. Because remember, these sea turtles are made to be in the water, right? They're not made to be out of the water. And so if their shells dry out, they could start peeling up. And so if you put Vaseline on there, it kind of protects them from that. And then same with their eyes. And so we had, volunteers that were helping to wipe down every single turtle with Vaseline. There was not one jar of Vaseline left in Port Aransas. Let's say that. They're still, City of Port Aransas is still recovering from the loss of Vaseline. So after the 24-hour period that they're dry docked, in most cases, we want to put them in the water. So if they have energy, we put them in the water, and we call that swim testing, and we watch them. And so if we put them in the water and they just float there, we take them back out, and we keep them back out for a little longer, test their fluids, look at their blood, make sure they're okay. But for the most part, when you take these turtles out after they've warmed up after that 24-hour period, they hit the water and they just take off. So it's pretty cool to see. They love doing that. Now, one thing that happened was that we had so many turtles in that we could not swim test them all. And so we ended up moving into the auditorium of the Marine Science Institute. And so luckily, they allowed us to do that. We ended up putting tarps and plastic down, and then put the turtles on top of that. And then we would separate them. So there's two different groups of turtles you have here. The left hand of your screen here are ones that have fibropapilloma, which is a virus that creates tumors. And we've been getting a lot more of those over the last 5 to 6 years. A lot more turtles are coming in with this virus. And so tumors can be on their eyes and stuff like that. Well, so those are in one side of the room. And then the other side of the, what we call the non-FP, non-fibropapilloma. And so we keep those separate because like any virus, we don't want the ones that don't have the virus to get it. Now, look in the screen here, you'll see a couple of these green sea, these are all green sea turtles here. One of these is really big and probably close to 200 pounds. These, whenever they came in and they were that big, we wanted to get them into the water because their weight alone might damage their organs on the inside. And so we would pick out the big ones and try to get those in the water before the smaller ones. Because remember, we knew what the temperatures were going to be warming up in 4 or 5 days. And so, we just needed to get to that point to where then we could release them into the water. And we don't feed these. So a lot of people say, well, I'll come by and bring you lettuce and stuff. Well, we don't feed these animals. They're reptiles. They can last a long time without food. And they do just fine because remember, we only have them in for 5 to 7 days. It's kind of real quick. These are some other images. It was real interesting when we would bring them into the auditorium here. This is the image on the left is looking inside of the auditorium at nighttime. So you can kind of see all the lights and stuff in there. Now the right-hand side, we put these turtles in, and if it was daytime, they were going towards the light. And so they would all go towards the windows and kind of pile up along the windows. So we'd have to move them back. It was real interesting. There was a lot of media throughout this whole thing, everyone, and we loved it because, kind of our big deal at Aimless Rehabilitation Keep is, yeah, for sure, we want to get the animals back in the water safely. That's priority number one. But at the same time, we also want to be able to educate folks about, what these animals are, why they're important, and why we ought to be protecting them. So anytime we can talk to the media, we try to do that. We try to give some awareness to these turtles. We also have a friends group called Friends of the Ark, and I put the URL up here if you ever want to look at their webpage, friendsoftheark.org. But they raise money for the Ark, and 100% of what is raised goes to feeding the birds and the turtles and making sure that they're healthy. And so during this event, they actually went to the grocery store and they sold T-shirts, and that raised a lot of money. And then also there were folks that were just sending in supplies for us. We typically get 1,500 animals in per year, and that's about 1,000 birds and 500 sea turtles. And so I'm not going to give it away yet, but the number of sea turtles we got in a 1-week period, we were running out of supplies. And so this was super helpful to be able to get these donations from folks. Okay, so more turtles. We thought we had a lot. After the first day, we had about 150 to 200 turtles that had come in. And that was about all of our floor space for that dry dock period until we were able to move into the auditorium. And so, the second day, boats were coming up into the marina and fishermen were lining up and just bringing in more and more turtles. So this is an image here on the left of a fisherman that was bringing in some sea turtles. And their boats would just have sea turtles all over the deck of them. It was pretty amazing. And then here, somebody brings in a truckload of turtles. So I talked about Dr. Shaver already and kind of, her role as the state coordinator in Texas. So she puts together all the sea turtles that are being rescued all over the state. So everybody kind of coordinates with her. So these are some of those numbers. And so if you look at all of Texas during this 7 to 10 day event, there was over 12,000 sea turtles that were stranded in Texas. You know, the previous record was in 2017 and 2018. We thought that this was a lot of turtles. That it was only 3,700 turtles that had come in. So, I mean, you know, what's that? More than triple the number of turtles had come in during this event. And so it was a huge effort. The other previous record throughout the entire U.S. was a little over 4,600 sea turtles. And that was set in Florida back in 2010. So this by far, you know, blows that out of the water. Now there's a couple of ways you could look at this. And one is like, oh my gosh, it's real bad. And it was, no doubt about it, it was real bad. But if you look at the sea turtle strandings and they're getting worse over time, which means more turtles are coming in, you know, sea turtle conservation is working. They were almost wiped out many years ago because they used to eat turtles, and, you know, and not only the turtles, but they would eat the eggs and all that. And it almost wiped the species out, many of the sea turtle species. And so to be able to see these numbers now coming in is really, it's bad to see that many, but also shows that the conservation efforts have been working. Now, it's real important that we look at the number of live turtles that were rescued, because every single turtle, these turtles, you know, they don't get sexual maturity till maybe 15, 18 years old. And, you know, if you take one out of the population, you know, once they reach sexual maturity, they're laying 80 to 120 eggs at a time. And they come back about every other year to lay eggs. And so if you take one of those animals out, you think of how many sea turtles that turtle would have produced, you know, over its lifetime. So when you're talking about thousands of turtles, it's so important that we look at how many were saved. And so over 4,200 sea turtles were rescued alive, rehabbed, and released back into the Gulf of Mexico. That was huge. Now look at the number of green sea turtles. They were all green sea turtles except for 3 loggerheads. Loggerheads look a little bit different than the sea turtle you see on the right-hand side here, in that they have a really big head. And these loggerheads that came in were massive. You know, they were 200 pounds, real big sea turtles. Now the ARC, which is the acronym we use for the Amos Rehabilitation Keep, the ARC still has about 10 turtles out of all the stranding, out of all the ones that were brought in. And I'm going to give you some stats on just the ARC here of how many we had brought in. But they were kept for more treatment. Now it took us a couple of days to get all these turtles out. And we had a guy who came in with his 18-wheeler. It was a moving 18-wheeler. And we loaded the sea turtles up into there. We also had U-Haul trucks that were lined with plastic that we would put into there. And then we loaded them onto head boats, which are fishing boats that take out, 100 fishermen at a time offshore. And we put about 550 sea turtles on the deck of the boat to be able to take these 20 miles offshore where the water temperatures were above the 55 degrees, which is kind of the criteria. They get immobilized at 50 degrees water temperature. So you want to make sure that there's a buffer there. So at 55 degrees is where our target was. And so we were able to take most of the sea turtles out the first day, and then the rest on the second day. Now I'm going to show you this video and hopefully it works. But what I want you to listen to, it's a 1-minute video. And this is of the first sea turtle that was released from the boat. And these are all deckhands that work on that head boat that were putting the turtles in. And so this is the first one. So let me just play this, and y'all turn your sound up so that you can hear what they're saying.
Okay. All right, get ready. Yeah. Start keep waiting for these things. Where is our I think it's stiff enough. It'll be fine, Will. Hey, Will, it's perfect. Okay. All right, get ready.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear that. But it was pretty amazing, and this was a modified
As Texas
slide
recovers from last week's Arctic cold temperatures, thousands of frozen sea turtles are also thawing out. News 8's Marcella Lee is here now with the latest on those endangered turtles that were rescued from frigid waters. Marcella?
Carlo, I'm so excited to show you this video from Sea Turtles Inc. out of South Padre Island.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, so that video that I just showed you, it actually had 6.3 million views when we put it up on Facebook. And so we've never had a video do that before, but I consider that going viral. But it was just so exciting to be there, see that first turtle go in, and everybody screaming and yelling, because really that's what this was all about, was being able to rescue the sea turtles and get them back into the Gulf of Mexico, where they could live for future generations. So if you look at the ark and how many turtles came in, these are numbers that we just got today. We don't have exact numbers just yet, but there was about 1,000 live sea turtles that came in. About 300 of them were dead. And, we would get a load of turtles in, especially once we got into day 5 or 6, the majority of them had already died. And then, so we had about 10 days of intake. We only had one, we did have one of the loggerheads. So out of the 3 loggerheads found in Texas, we had one of those. And then, like I said earlier, I wanted to go into a little more detail about the 10 turtles that we kept. And so some of these, that FP I was talking to you about, the fibropapilloma, which is the virus that creates these tumors. Tumors can get around the eyes. They can get around the flippers to where they can't, move like they should to be able to feed. And so our veterinarians go in and they're able to do surgeries to remove those. And so that's why we kept some of those behind, so that the veterinarians could rehab them, and so that then we can get them out safely to where they'll be able to live long lives. And then this is towards the end here. This is, you would not believe the smell that these animals leave behind. And so this is me mopping up afterwards. And I had some crazy Lysol that I was using to mop up. Luckily, they're redoing our Marine Science Education Center down here. So if any of y'all come down, to Port Aransas, please do come in here, and you can see where the sea turtles were. And it's all being redone, so there's actually going to be nice aquaria and stuff like that. But if you are interested in everything I just talked about and you want to see it in a video type format, we did put together a documentary. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's on the Mission Aransas Reserve YouTube channel. And so feel free to log on there. We have a lot of other videos as well. But if you look at Mission Aransas Reserve, this is one of the latest videos we put up there. I just want to say thanks to all the organizations that and volunteers that went out to save these animals. That was key to the success, and saving over 4,000 turtles in the state of Texas, and about 1,000 turtles here at the Ark. So with that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions. Thank y'all.
Okay, Jace, so we do have some questions. So somebody asked about how many people, and they said volunteers, but I know this was there was a because of COVID, our typical volunteer force was very limited. But can you address maybe like how many people were involved in this effort of collecting, caring for, and releasing these turtles?
Hundreds. There were hundreds of people throughout the state of Texas. And so like if you look at the National Seashore, they probably had 25 to 50 volunteers. If you look at the Texas State Aquarium, they had about 25 volunteers. Same thing with down at Sea Turtle Inc. They actually had hundreds of people going out, scouring the shorelines and then bringing them the turtles there. So here at the Ark, unfortunately, we're not able to use volunteers because of COVID. And so, we had folks that were bringing in turtles, but they weren't allowed to stay any period of time to help out, unfortunately. So really a lot of the work fell on the staff and the Mission Aransas Reserve staff. And so there was probably, 10 to 15 of us at any one time. But really the ARC staff, there's 5 ARC staff and there's 2 veterinarians, and that was the core team, and they were there every single day for 8 to 10 days for 12 to 13 hours. I mean, I'd get home at night. I think I'm still sore from that. But some of these turtles, a lot of them were over 100 pounds, and so we're just moving turtles all day long. Move them to the water so they can be swim tests. Take them out of the water so that we can put others in there. Move them onto the truck so that then we can move them onto the boat. I think it was a really great workout, and I don't know if my body could handle any more of that.
Somebody expressed amazement that you were able to do so much with so few people. So it was an amazing effort. So somebody else wanted to know, and I was kind of wondering this myself, is there a particular reason why green sea turtles were so much more abundant than loggerheads?
Yeah, so it has to do with where they're at in their life stage. And so, the larger green sea turtles are really offshore, way out in the ocean. When the sea turtles are younger, they're up in the bays, and their diets change over time. So when they're that young age, they're feeding on algae and seagrass and stuff like that. The green sea turtles are. And when it got real cold so fast, they weren't able to get out to the passes quick enough, because you're talking 2 to 3 feet of water and temperatures dropping by 20 degrees within a day or something like that. The larger loggerheads and things like that, they're out in the deeper ocean, so that's not something that we would see. And same with the Kemp's Ridley. We didn't see any Kemp's Ridley, but the interesting thing is here on the Texas coast, Kemp's Ridley is one of the sea turtles that comes and nests here. They're a day nester. That nesting season starts April 1st to mid-July. And so we've got people that are going out looking for nests during that time on a daily basis. But we didn't find any that were cold stunned because they're not here. Sea turtles migrate all around. And so, luckily it was just the green sea turtles that were here at this time of year.
Okay, and we have a group of 8 to 11-year-olds watching and listening from Vacaville, California. So shout out to Vacaville. They want to express their appreciation for what you're doing. And someone asked, so if over 12,000 turtles stranded and over 4,000 were released, does that mean 8,000 died?
Yeah, unfortunately that does. A lot of them. Remember that 2-day period where at the very beginning where bridges were iced over and roads were iced over, people couldn't get out to be able to search the shorelines because it was, there's no access to it. And so that was a kind of a critical period. And then just the amount of coverage. I mean, we're talking, Texas coastline, 360 miles or something like that of coastline. And then that's just of the beach coastline. Hardly any of these turtles were found on the beach. They're all back in the bays where it's shallow. It's hard to get to. And it's not just a straight shoreline, it's a zigzag of marshes and things like that. And so, unfortunately, there was about 8,000 that had died.
And then you referenced a little bit before, I think that you said the 2017, 2018 cold stunning event or something. Someone said, have you ever done a large scale rescue mission like this before? And you talked a little bit about that. Can you compare the two? Because I know you were in on that one as well.
Yeah, so we did. And I was there in 2017, 2018. And we thought we had gotten about 500 sea turtles into the ark at that time. And that was right after Hurricane Harvey hit. So we were recovering from Hurricane Harvey. All of our systems weren't up to par. You know, a lot of our heating systems were broken, and we were just getting them online as the cold stunning event was happening. So it was like this whole nother disaster type thing. So yeah, we've had challenges before, and we learned from each one of them. And I think that we're going to be in a better position when the next one comes, because we are now preparing for backup power to have a large-scale generator that can heat some of our systems, so that if this happens again, we're fully functional, you know, without having to worry about that. But so I'd say the last event that we had, we were able to have volunteers though, and I mean we had about 50 volunteers that were able to be here on campus helping out, and that makes a huge difference. And so, you know, hopefully this COVID stuff gets over soon, and we can get back to whatever the new normal is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in South Texas are with you in looking at backup power now, Jace, after that freeze. So someone asked, is it possible that the population can recover after the 8,000 dead, considering the current status of ocean health and conservation efforts being made?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I think it is. You know, that's why, you know, the sea turtle population has been doing so good, because the conservation efforts have been working. And so we just got to keep at it and not let our guard down. And so, yeah, I think that it can come back.
Okay, and our group from Vacaville is asking for the total again of turtles that the ARC took in, and then the total that they released.
Oh, so our survival rate was actually really good. We brought in about, you know, just under 13,000 or 1,300 sea turtles. 1,000 of those were alive. And so we actually had a really good survival rate. Part of the reason that our survival rate was so good was that because our partners at the Padre Island National Seashore, they could actually bring the turtles into their site. And if they had them for a 24-hour period, they would know whether they were dead or not, and they would not send the ones that they knew were dead to us. And so that kind of helped us out, you know, with our success numbers.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions. There's lots of comments in the chat box about appreciation for what everyone at the ARC did, and people are excited to keep following the ARC now. So we're excited to have everyone aware of what the ARC is doing. So thanks so much for this presentation, Jay. And I guess if we don't have any more questions, oh, sorry, we have one. Is this the largest type of turtle? Green turtle type. So are greens the largest type of turtle?
Oh no, so we actually have 5 species of sea turtles in the Gulf of Mexico. One, of course, is the green. One is the Kemp's, which is the smallest. We have the loggerhead. Then we have the hawksbill. And then the largest is the leatherback. And that one is really rare. We have seen a couple of those every once in a while that come in, but those are the ones that are, you know, 600 pounds, big black ones, ridges on the back. Those are the largest ones. Good question.
Well, Jace, that looks like it's it. So thank you so much for this presentation. And again, lots and lots of appreciation in the chat box for the presentation and the work. So keep doing what you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to hosting our last presentation from the Marine Science Institute tomorrow night on seagrass monitoring. So if you haven't signed up at the University of Texas Science Festival website, go ahead and sign up for that one as well. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us.